thank you for joining us today for Webinar Wednesday. We are glad to have you with us. Our webinar today is designed to help you find great making and tinkering activities for your program and prepare you to evaluate and adapt activities to maximize your learning. Our special guest today is Paul Hill. He's an associate professor with Utah State University Extension, and he has led economic development and 4-H STEM activity programs in his state. He also serves as associate director of the E-Extension Innovation Lab and community and strategy leader for the National Educational Technology Learning Network. In my experience, Paul is most well known within the 4-H community for his work with makers and makerspaces. But Paul, that's what I think of you doing. Are there other things you'd like to share with us about your work with makers or with 4-H?
No, that's pretty much all I do.
It seems like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's enough.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to start with a poll so that we can get to know what all of our participants in the webinar today are thinking and what they know about making and selecting activities from maker spaces. I think Melissa's going to pull those polls up for us. There's 2 of them. And as you respond, then we'll broadcast the results so you can see what other people are responding as well. We have a lot of agreement, really more than I expected, that it is really important to us when we're selecting activities that youth are developing STEM skills. The fact that they're having fun is important, but not nearly as important as that they're developing skills. And time, supplies, connections to prior experiences or future experiences are important, but not at all as important as those skills are to our group. That's really a strong trend. I'm glad to see that strong sense of agreement. The other area where I see a lot of agreement is on adapting activities to build skills. That makes sense because that's really important to you as a group, or adapting the activities to make connections to prior knowledge. But it looks like in general, we're pretty comfortable with making quite a few adaptations to the activities that we select to make them meet our needs. And I think that's good to see because that's going to be important when you're working with youth in a making and tinkering space to have that freedom to adapt activities. So as we're going through the webinar today, we'll be talking about strategies that you can use to adapt activities to make them meet your needs. I also want to point out in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there are a couple of resources that you can download that might really help with these topics in the polls. The first is the revised curriculum vetting criteria, which is adapted from Great Science for Girls. And it's a really useful list to use when you're viewing a STEM activity to assess whether it's a really good quality STEM activity and is going to meet your needs. So I encourage you to download that checklist and see if you find it to be helpful. The other resource up there is how making projects promote deep learning. And that's a handout for you that's really about the research behind what we're talking about in the webinar today. So I encourage you to download the resources from our the PDFs at the top of the page or the web links at the bottom of the page. Those are going to be very important to you. And again, I encourage you to interact with us and share your ideas in the chat box. We want to start out thinking about makerspaces, and this may be the image that comes to mind to you. I have to admit, when I went online to search for images for this webinar, this is what I think of as a makerspace. But we're really going to try to think outside this box today and think about bringing the maker movement into out-of-school time. And our goal in this case is to bring youth, technology, and community together in new ways in our programs. And this space that we see here may not be the most important component to make that happen. The view we're going to take of the maker movement builds on a long tradition of constructivist learning theory and a do-it-yourself attitude. Making helps youth develop their confidence and competence by engaging them in creativity, collaboration, and problem-solving skills. With this in mind, it becomes clear that it's really not about the space or the tools that you have to work with youth, but how engaged they are. So our focus today is really going to be on how do we go about selecting those activities that are going to engage youth with technology and with their community. So that's kind of my take on this. Paul, I'd like your perspective. How do you define what making is, or activities for making, or the space that we need for that? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts kind of go into, I mean, it's a way to express ourselves, and so I think we express ourselves through the things that we create, and so this is another avenue to do that. And creating a safe space is what we're really good at in Extension, and it's just important to understand and realize that making is not about 3D printing. It's not about using the laser cutter. It's not so much about what tool that you're using. It's the freedom. It's the fact that 4-H. I think I always like to say that we started the maker movement before it was mainstream and cool and popular like it is now. But we've been doing all these things. They're second nature to us, and so it's just a part of kind of going to where the people are, as Wayne Gretzky would say, skate to where the puck will be. And we see that there's a lot of momentum and engagement with the maker movement, and people are identifying with it, and they are like the OGs. Yeah, we're the OGs of the maker movement. I love that. And so when I visit counties that are really remote and rural, when you talk about making, they're like, yeah, I do that every day. When your AC goes out in the summer and you got to fix it, not every county has these rural counties aren't in urban areas where you can just call someone, they'll be there in a few hours. You've got to figure it out. You've got to rig it. You've got to use duct tape. You've got to break out the soldering irons and do it yourself. And so this do-it-yourself movement, it's what we're good at. It's what we are already doing, and we just need to embrace it and kind of go along with the popularity of it, and because we're going to attract new people into 4-H. And I've just personally, I've seen so many youth who've been traditional 4-H members join the maker movement, and then I've seen people who have come into 4-H because of the maker movement and then got into traditional things like raising rabbits and livestock, and so and getting involved in leadership and team councils. So there's so much potential there, and I feel like we've had a lot of success in my county, but we're just really scratching the surface.
Thank you so much. So we've been using this framework this summer about looking for learning in making activities, and the things that we have been talking about come from an article in Science Education called Learning Through STEM-Rich Tinkering, and it is one of the sites you can visit using the links in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And what we want you to think about from this article is really to think about what are you trying to create in your environment, in the activities that you're creating. We encourage you to observe the amount of time you spend on their projects and seek to increase their level of engagement, to listen for expressions of joy and curiosity and frustration that demonstrate that they are engaged. And then watch for evidence that they're directing their own plan, deciding what to do, that they're being intentional about what they're doing, and look for variations in their pathway, that everyone's project doesn't look the same. That's another indication of intentionality, which is one of the signs of learning in a makerspace. Next, we want you to watch for how youth are repurposing tools and materials to demonstrate that they're being innovative. to look for evidence that their processes or products that they're creating are becoming more complex and innovative, and listen for their new ideas about how things are done. Those are all signs that they are learning from their experience. And watch for youth sharing or adapting ideas from others within their group or the room that they're working in, or others within the larger making community. That's an indication of their solidarity in this movement. Listen for learners who are supporting and contributing to the work of others. So those sort of features of the experience, engagement, intentionality, innovation, and solidarity, are all the markers we can look for in an activity that is independent making or creating activity that we may not be able to assess in other ways, but these are indications that they're learning and that they're meeting those goals that we talked about engaging with technology and engaging with community in new ways. So with this framework in mind, we're going to move on to thinking about how do you select activities for your makerspace or for making within your after-school space. We know in our webinars that all of the participants bring expertise to the experience here today, so this is a time where we really want you to share your ideas in the chat box so we can learn from one another. Where do you go to find the activities that you use when you're doing making? One of my favorite sites I'll share with you here is the Tinkering Studio at the Exploratorium. The Tinkering Studio is an immersive, active space at the Exploratorium in San Francisco where visitors take time to stop and explore and create. They have a great website, and I have a link to that at the bottom of the page, where they have lots of ideas for projects that you can try out in your program. And we want your ideas in the chat box. And Paul, can you share with us where do you go to find activities, and what are you looking for when you're selecting activities for making?
Sure. What I can do here is I'll put in the chat box. I did a fellowship with the Extension Foundation on the Maker Movement, and I just made a webpage that has links to different projects and things you can do. So if you go to that page and you click on resources, there are websites to get maker projects. And so one thing that, one of my favorites is the PBS Kids Design Squad. They have just tremendous projects that you can do out of, with basic things you have around the house. You can even select the supplies that you have, and then and it tells you the projects you can make. So you can say, I have cardboard and tape, and it'll tell you it's string and toilet paper rolls, and it'll tell you all the things you can make with that. And so, but generally, a little bit of hot glue, duct tape, masking tape, and cardboard. There's a lot you can do, and you can build all sorts of design challenges and projects. And so, Rube Goldberg types of things. And so that's one of my favorite places to go, but also Make Magazine, Make Sign, /projects is another good place to go. I really like Instructables, and but those are just a few. And I will a lot of times, I've said this, and some people disagree with me, but when you're just following instructions, that's not making, right? But I think that is a way to get people into making. So, we have this consumer culture of like not knowing what's in the black box, and knowing the code behind the different, technology that we use. And a lot of people can be intimidated when you say, okay, here's all the supplies, just make something. And I've tried that, and oftentimes that can go terribly wrong, because they're really kind of suffering from lack of creativity. And so what gets people started is you give them some instructions, and that gets them going. And then once they get going, it's like, okay, now you can modify. One thing that we've done is we make these little stuffed animal with their eyes, and they light up, and we laser cut different types of eyeballs. We laser cut different types of teeth. And so when they make these little monsters, they can make it their own. They follow the general instructions of like how to sew, but once they get that down, they can start making monsters look, and these little stuffed animal monsters that light up and blink and make noises. They start making them look differently and making it their own. And so I like what you said earlier, Sandra, about making sure that not everything looks the same, that there's a way that you can customize what you want. And a lot of times maybe you look and you find the instructions and you're like, oh, this is good, well then adapt it. And I looked at the poll earlier, and it's like that's what we are really good at in Extension, is we look at like the curriculum and then we're like, all right, that's good, I'm going to take it from here, and we do our own thing. And so that's use the instructions as inspiration, but definitely do your own thing and put your own spin on things.
In just a little bit, we're going to watch a video from Click to Science, and we're going to talk about this idea of how do you adapt an activity, how do you make it more open-ended, more about the creativity and the process that they're engaging in. So I think that's a great start into that. Do you have any tips on how we decide what makes it a good activity?
Oh.
What is good in this context? That's a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. I don't know if you have any insight on that.
To each their own, but for me, when I am working with my staff, I have some really great staff assistants and volunteers who have different strengths. And so what I like to do with the activities is make it kind of progressive, where they build a certain portion of that project. Let's say they're doing they're making a stuffed animal that lights up. And what I like to do is get the volunteers with their different areas of expertise. And so one part of the project could involve soldering, and so they go and they put together the soldering portion with the volunteer that teaches the soldering, and then they go to the sewing station. I mean, none of this is new to anyone. And then they go to the laser cutting station. But again, I've talked about soldering and laser cutting, and you're like, well, what the heck? And maybe there's a section that's 3D printing. Well, that's okay. That's what I do, and I have that equipment. Maybe you don't, but what I like to do is try to incorporate as many maker skills and abilities as possible. And so, circuitry and doing conductive thread, that's one, and understanding that. And then they move to another one that's just the sewing, and then another one where they're doing some hot gluing. And then another one where it's like, well, if we're going to do some little bit of graphic design, and then we're gonna prototype and sketch what the monster should look like, and then we actually either laser cut the fabric with precision, or we cut it with scissors. But try to use as many different maker skill sets as possible. And so maybe you're drilling, like we did one where we made like jewelry out of Legos, and we had it was a drill press, and they were like drilling Lego pieces, and they were like, oh my gosh, can we do this? And it's like, yes, it's okay, you can drill a hole in a Lego. But there's all sorts of different skill sets that are involved in making it. It encompasses so much. And so don't just do it all in one space. Maybe move to different rooms or different areas of a room, and different stations. That kind of breaks it up. And then try to involve as many skill sets and break up. I mean, be intentional about it in advance and start thinking, okay, what are we going to make? Or start with the question, what skill sets do we want to teach through experience? And then from there, it's like, well, we want to teach soldering, we want to teach sewing, we want to teach laser cutting and 3D printing or 3D modeling. And okay, now what can we make from there? And so that's what I'd recommend.
I love that idea of making it progressive, and Melissa did a good job of capturing some of those ideas and including those in the chat box. We can look back at them, but making it progressive as they go through the activity and having different stations. Even if you don't have a laser cutter, you can have that space where you have tools for cutting that might include scissors, but might also include maybe a rotary cutter or a paper cutter, depending on what materials you're using, so they can be using different tools and being careful using those tools and learning to use them well.
Yeah, moving around and working with different volunteers and different stations, different kids, they get up around and moving, and it's just, you know, at Stanford Design School, they teach that, you know, the space dictates behavior. And so when you set up your space, maybe you're in a makerspace, or maybe you just like converted a room in the extension office or a community center. But when you set up the space and the design of the experience to be interactive and moving around, if you're just sitting at the same spot the whole time, generally like our minds don't work as well when we're just sitting, and we tend to get like lazier and chilled. But when you're standing and you're working on things, or you're moving, or even if you are sitting like sewing, and you're getting up and you're moving, that really dictates the behavior of the activity, and it makes it, you walk through the experiential learning model, and at the end it's easier for me. I like it too at the end when we finish the project. All right, let's bring them up and let's you know, let's present and let's talk about it. So like, let's say we made these little monsters. You stand up and you give it a name and you talk about it, and you talk about your experiences and what struggles you had making it. You know, which skill set was the hardest for you? Which one came naturally? Which one did you help other people to, you know, that you were so good that you helped others? And so that helps when they have that opportunity to present and then get feedback from other people. And then it helps in the debrief later on when you're, you know, I usually like to just have everyone, we sit on the floor and we just talk about the experience and how that relates to, you know, life in general. So
I love how your question about, you know, what skills were difficult or what skills came easy for you, how did you help others, really helps build that point of solidarity too, helps them create a community where they're learning from one another, which is one of the things that I think is really unique about a makerspace, that it's much more level in that it's learning from peers more than learning from experts or teachers. So you've got your volunteers that are in there working in their area of expertise, but they're really focusing on supporting youth, not necessarily being the teacher as they're doing that. So I like the way your reflection is building those skills that we were just talking about. I am an out-of-school program run by YUSA, and in the lesson, the students are learning about simple machines. And this activity isn't necessarily a making activity. I'd say it's an engineering design challenge probably. But what I want you to think of as you're watching this activity, the youth are building something to be a grape smasher using what they've learned about simple machines. It is a pretty facilitated activity. It's a guided experience, as we talked about earlier. And so I want to challenge you to think about how would you help youth move from a guided experience like we're seeing here in the video to a process that includes more open exploration and creation of their own ideas. What skills would the youth need to develop along the way? You'll see some of them are pretty young. And how would you start the process? What would you do to help them move along the way? I will pull up the video and then we'll take some time to chat about it after we watch the video together.
So how else are we going to use a pulley?
We could replace this thing that would smash something into something that would grab.
Grabbing it. Ooh, what jobs are out there that use that?
Construction builders?
Construction builders. Perfect. They do that all the time, huh?
An important strategy of embracing active STEM learning is to get youth thinking critically about their designs and allowing time to create on their own.
Okay, so how are we going to get the grape up there?
Look at that.
In this video, you will see many examples of adults working with youth to design and create a grape smasher using simple machines. Listen as staff ask questions that get you thinking about different design options and encourage reflection of possible design outcomes.
This is a spaceship that they take in outer space. How do you think they might use simple machines to make a spaceship? A pulley, right? They need to lift that big heavy top on there. What jobs today could we use these simple machines in? How would a firefighter use a simple machine?
An axe.
That is an excellent one. Which one's an axe? Could be used as a lever?
A wedge.
A wedge. Excellent. What if a fireman needs to get somewhere really high? What are they going to use?
A ladder.
A ladder. Which one's a ladder?
Inclined plane.
Inclined plane. Excellent. Good job, Emily. So you guys, we use simple machines every day. Maybe you guys don't even know it, but we use them every day.
We can put it right there,
Let's see. I want to see.
and it's going to fall on top of the wedge, and it's going to split in half. Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
So what could you do so it makes it so it's freestanding so that it won't fall? Maybe rocks? Or anything that would have weight. Go over on the table and see if you can find anything that has weight in it.
Look at mine.
Remember how the Egyptians lifted up the big blocks when we talked about that?
Oh, yeah.
Pulley. Yeah. All right. Good. So we're gonna make a pulley. What kind of system is that? Do you remember? It's called pulley because you're pulling it up, right? All right. So if I hold it right here and you lift it up, now what? Did it work? What could we try differently?
So I want to hear your ideas, chat box. How are you going to help you move to a process of open exploration as they're creating their grape smasher? What skills do they need to develop? What strategies do you need to use as facilitator? As people are sharing their ideas, it's important to create an environment, a physical space and a social emotional space where youth can take risks, make mistakes, and feel safe about it and learn from their mistakes. So that's a really important thing to create as you're setting up your space. I saw some ideas about taking time, making sure that they have the learning they need, the background knowledge, the vocabulary to be successful in the activities that you're doing. So I see some great ideas here. Melissa and Paul, I'll give you a chance if you want to add anything about what you noticed in the chat box before we move on.
I'll just add that I liked what was said about creating takes time, and it's hard to make the time to prepare. I mean, it's all about preparation in these experiences, and so I've started doing, it was like camp every week of the summer, and then we had several activities a month and out of school time, and it was just getting to be too much, and it was like I was almost getting behind because I couldn't keep up with new technologies and new software because we were organizing all of these experiences, and so we took a step back and started really realizing that we haven't been engaging our volunteers as well, and so we've been using them, working alongside them, but we needed to kind of get them to the point where they could take the lead and make these things happen. And so we're able to do more now because we took a step back, started focusing on doing these activities with the volunteers, and then beta testing that experience on youth, and then getting them comfortable to where they felt they had the skill set. And so now we do a few camps each summer with the youth, but the majority of our time is spent with volunteers. And so a lot of if you follow us on Instagram, it's just Dixie 4-H. If you go there, you see there's a lot of these camps going on. Well, those are all pictures that were sent to us from volunteers. And so, we're reaching more youth now because we couldn't scale our efforts because we were just doing everything ourselves in the beginning and using some volunteers like we should, but we weren't really putting it in the hands of the volunteers. And so now we're able to do 5 times as many camps in the summer, and then there's constant programs going on weekly in different locations and out of school time because the volunteers are trained and ready to go. So if you don't have time, stop working so hard and just focus on volunteers.
Great advice. All right, let's move on to think about how we're going to go about implementing these ideas. I do want to make a comment. I got some feedback from Dagan that the web links were not working. I think I fixed those. If you're trying out those web links and you see that they're not working or one of them's not working, do let us know. Appreciate that so that we can make it work for you. So now we want to think about how do we put this into practice? What are the things that we can do to implement these ideas in our own programs? I know we've already talked a lot about that. My first question for Paul was how do you start implementing it? And I think the advice he just shared about starting with volunteers and focusing on engaging volunteers and building up your volunteer base is very important. I want you to think about a lot of our audience works in the after-school space and after-school programs, and one of their biggest challenges we're hearing over and over is they don't have a dedicated space to do these activities. So do you have any tips or ideas, Paul, to help get started when you don't have a dedicated space, but you want to include it in an after-school sort of program?
Yes, absolutely. I actually had a dedicated space, and then we got it taken away, and so it's like, but we still continue to do Maker. And so if you don't have a space, you're going to have to schlep. So invest in a really good foldable hand cart. I will put one in the chat box. My favorite Amazon product, but yeah, clear totes that show what's inside. Go and load up all your stuff, and then we kind of do these pop-up maker spaces. If you go to the link on the for my fellowship, I just recently published a Journal of Extension article about the different types of maker spaces. So you could do kind of a distributed maker space. There's obviously, it would be nice to just have everything in a maker space, but those things take time and funding. And so what you can do is you can just set it up wherever you're at, and it takes a little bit of help, with volunteers moving things around. But that's what I do is just set up wherever you can and bring making to your location, and then realize that like everything we're already doing making. So don't think that, oh, I can't make unless I have that 3D printer or laser cutter. If you're crocheting, you're making. If you're doing cooking and you're making bread, you're making. If you're gardening, you're a maker. So again, it goes back to like the things you're already doing are maker. It's just part of identifying with this DIY movement, and really what the maker movement's all about is it's about access. So it's about access to the tools of innovation, and so when you get these tools, when you get you're teaching computer science or something, you're creating games on Scratch with code, you're helping people get access. And maybe you don't even have access, you don't have the tools, but do what you can to get the skills and the tools that you can, and then bring those and help people get access. So it's all about this removing of the barriers to making. I mean, a lot of kids don't have that opportunity, and we want to, it's our effort, it's our work, and which is the why I love 4-H is we don't just focus on, oh yeah, we'll just set it up here. We're very and we'll try to engage as many kids as possible. We're very intentional about what we do, and we make an effort to seek out underserved audiences. So looking and finding those left-handed Latina girls in your neighborhood. Those are you look at who's underserved in your community, and let's go find them and bring making a maker experience to them.
Paul, we have a question that came up in the chat box about the best way to train volunteers, especially if you're just getting started or your volunteers are older youth, high school or college students. Do you have some tips for working with those volunteers?
So you said working with volunteers, like training them? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. So when you train volunteers, do what you like. If you were teaching a youth, so like teach the volunteer, because like when I am showing a youth how to use a laser cutter, it's the same experience as training an adult to use a laser cutter. And so I start off with like, let's just do a basic activity, and then once they're schooled and they're skilled and like, okay, now I know how to make a 4H clover ornament on a laser cutter, and I'm going to engrave it on plexiglass, and then I'm going to cut it in wood. Now they know how to do it. Okay, now I've trained you. It's just our train the trainer approach that we do. We also do in Utah what we call a tri-team, which is teens reaching youth. And so a lot of times when I say volunteers, I'm actually talking about teen leaders. And so so this tri-team, teens reaching youth, that's honestly the best. I mean, there's not a better way to move the maker movement forward in our communities and spread the good word of 4-H is with the high school age students. These older kids are the best mentors, and they have the time, most of them. I mean, most of the kids that I work with, they're kind of nerdy like me, so they don't play sports, and so they're like all about like making things and coding and robotics, and so they have plenty of time to volunteer and mentor younger youth. And so that's really the way that I train them. We do a workshop. We put on the exact same workshop that we would for the younger kids. I train these older kids, and then they put it on for the younger youth.
I agree. I think teen leaders are the best helpers in this program. That they're a near peer. They can really help you see where they could go in the future, and it gives them a chance to build their skills as well, which is important for teens.
Yes.
Well, I have a few tips to share with you about implementing the making and tinkering in your program. These come from the paper that you can download, Digital Fabrication and Making in Education, and I just checked. I think that link is working now. So if you want to see more details about these tips to get started. So making projects are really powerful when they're locally relevant and they're culturally meaningful to you. So it's important to think about how you can support differences in the way students approach learning, and to engage all youth in your making and tinkering activities. You need to create open-ended activities where there's lots of pathways and lots of correct answers and good solutions that they can find along the way. You need to allow students to work together and learn from one another. We just talked about how powerful it is to have teen leaders or high school or college youth to help them learn from, and also learning from their peers really is part of the power of this type of activity. Don't set yourself up as an expert, but as a facilitator, and help them have the expertise. And a topic we've come back to a couple times, provide times for students to slow down as they're exploring ideas, to notice things, but also times for them to speed up, to get excited about building and putting together their ideas and making them come into reality. In the paper, Digital Fabrication and Making in Education, Paulo Blinkstein, the author, explains that educators should focus less on completing a large number of projects and more on making projects that are iterative, that allow a chance for students to make mistakes and redesign and improve their design, and allow time for students and facilitators to think together, to troubleshoot, to make improvements, and to come to a better solution. Do take time to download those resources. We think they'll be really helpful to you, and there's some great ideas that Paul shared in the chat box, so you want to take time to do that. Our second goal for this webinar, in addition to helping you find activities that you can do in your program, was really to think about how you evaluate making and tinkering activities. And we've talked a lot about what makes a good activity and how you can focus on engaging youth, building their skills, and building their sense of community. I do want to remind you that curriculum vetting list is a great go-to resource that you can use as a checklist as you're evaluating an activity to really find out if it's going to be effective at engaging the youth in your program, if it's going to be appropriate for a diverse set of youth that are coming with a lot of different experiences.
Just it start small. Don't feel like you need to do a big you know, making it's start off with like just a few, you know, kids, teens, and start doing maker camps and maker activities. Really ride that wave of the maker movement, because that's what's mainstream, and it's not something that's just a fad. A lot of people think that it is, but when you have the White House organizing maker fairs and it's kind of spinning off this new Nation of Makers association and movement, and then you have the maker fairs that are growing, and millions and millions of people are attending these things. This is a revolution, and it's going to change the way. I mean, the maker movement, these new tools, the new technologies that we're gaining access to. I mean, I went to my first 3D printing show was in 1998. And these 3D printers at that time were the size of a car, and now they're, you know, there's one on my desktop, and so these tools are becoming more and more available, and we're only gonna see this access to these tools of innovation. You know, there's going to be widespread, and so the way that we create and the way that we make and manufacture, it's changing. It's all changing, and so this is an opportunity for you to teach youth who can become entrepreneurs that can dream up these amazing new products and ideas, and then use new technology to create them, and that's going to impact them, and it's going to impact the world. And so don't fight it. I had a colleague that's like, Paul, I'm sick and tired of all this maker stuff. Like, everyone's like, what's the big deal? And the big deal is that this is a movement. It's not just something that I'm here talking about. There's like all these people that know way more about the maker movement than me, and it's happening with or without 4-H, and we should join in, because we can add the value that 4-H can add is that we're leaders. We are conveners. We're organizers. We've been doing this. We're the OG makers. We've been making before making was cool, and so we need to take the lead and organize these efforts and connect with. I mean, you want to join the maker movement, and you're like, but how do I get volunteers? Well, go and Google and look up on Meetup.com and look for the Raspberry Pi user groups in your neighborhood, in your community. Go look for people who are coding and doing like technical things, and find out how they're involved in hardware. Go to like a quilters guild, go to a sewing group, and reach out to these people and draw them in, because they're already making, and some of them, like, I found clubs of volunteers working with youth, and they're maker clubs, and they were making these balloons, these like high altitude balloons, and they were attaching cameras and Arduinos. I think they were running it on Raspberry Pi, which is a microcontroller that's the size of a credit card. And they're already doing like STEM. They're a maker club, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, you should be a 4-H club. You're missing out on positive youth development, on the essential elements of 4-H, leadership, following experiential learning model, and all these things. And so it's like, it's just a no-brainer. And so it's not a turf battle. It's, you know, and so I'm reaching out to them, and they're like,
Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today. I really have appreciated your insight and your perspective in what we're talking about.
thanks, happy to be here.